Welcome to the Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Nicastro. Today, we're going to be talking about building change resilience from the inside out. I am personally quite excited to welcome our guest today, Sarah Aviram, who is keynote speaker on navigating change and author of the book, The Scenic Route. Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Sarah. Good to be here with you.
Sarah and Sarah, what could be better for a
And
podcast?
both with H's, so
Yes, the right way. No
the
offense.
right way.
All right. So before we get into it, just tell everyone a little bit about yourself, anything you want to share about your background, and the work you do today.
Sure. I am a born and bred New Yorker. My career has mainly been in human resources. And in 2020, went off on my own, left the corporate world, became a keynote speaker and workshop facilitator and leadership coach. And we can kind of get into more of those details in a bit. And I focus on the topic of managing through change and uncertainty and how we can become more adaptable, we can lead ourselves and understand we have more agency than we think during times of change. And I love working with different organizations to help give their employees that kind of empowerment.
Yeah. Leading through change and navigating uncertainty. I mean, what better area to take part in since 2020, really? Okay. So you talk about how the work you do today is obviously shaped by your time in leadership. So you were a Fortune 500 HR in, like you said, in HR. But then you have this really incredible journey that we're going to talk more about in a moment, where a lived experiment, if you will. You worked in 12 different countries across 12 months. So we're going to talk about that. But before we get there, I want to ask, from your time in leadership in HR, what stuck with you most that you bring into the work you do today?
Yeah, that I think we assume that people have the same motivations that we do for working, and that what excites us and motivates us about work motivates others. And it's quite individual thing, but also it changes over time.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is someone might have a priority to get the highest salary possible or a certain title at a certain point in their life. But as their lives change, as priorities change, milestones, whatever they're working toward changes, their priorities and what motivates them changes as well. So it's important to be checking in with someone, especially if they work at your organization for a longer period of time. But what's driving them now? Maybe it's opportunities for growth. Maybe it's opportunities for impact. And not that they don't want to get paid fairly, but what's driving them is a bit different. And so it's okay for those things to change. It's okay for leaders to ask how those things have changed and to adjust opportunities and incentives based on your direct reports priorities.
Yeah. It's interesting. The first thing that popped into my mind when you gave that answer is how that same point is applicable in just life and relationships, right? So I am on a personal level, like I think about this in the context of like how I operate and how I'm driven versus my husband. And sometimes it drives me nuts because I'm like, get up and go and and I have to remind myself like not everyone's built the way I'm built, right? Like you can't operate in life that way. You can't project the expectations you have for yourself or what makes you feel productive or fulfilled onto another person. And I think, you obviously answered that question from the perspective of an HR leader, but it just made me think how applicable that is just in life in general. And for our audience, most of whom I would say are not in HR, but they're in leadership, just in how you relate to people. Yes, it's important to understand, what drives them and motivates them from, a retention and a career progression perspective. But it's also so important just in the effectiveness of your communication and how you relate to them, as a team member, as a human being. So
100%, totally.
it's really interesting. So, can you tell us a bit about how this opportunity, this idea to travel to these 12 countries came about. I'm curious, as you do, about a couple of things. How did you decide where you would visit? Um, and setting out, did you sort of have a specific objective in mind, like I want to learn X, or did you know that you wanted to write a book, or did that kind of come about as everything unfolded? I want to hear all about it.
Okay, so let me take you back to 2018.
Okay.
I was the director of talent development at a New York-based tech company, and I was researching future work trends, just seeing how our company could be competitive for the best talent. And I was reporting to the CEO temporarily. There was a bit of a restructure in the organization, and he said he wanted to hear my big and bold ideas for 2019. So I come up with probably the biggest and boldest idea I've ever had. I had 15 minutes with him, my first ever one-to-one meeting with him, and I could not believe I was about to pitch this, which was that I should be the guinea pig of this new world of remote work. Now, this was end of 2018. All the research was showing that remote work was going to be the future.
Mhm.
Obviously, the pandemic accelerated that by at least a decade. We could never have predicted that. But that's where the trends were going. And I said, I should be this guinea pig of the world of remote work and figure out what are the opportunities and challenges that remote work presents. And if we were wanting to compete for the best talent out there, would we be open to hiring people that were living outside of New York City, for example? Would we allow people to work flexibly if that meant hiring the best talent in our organization? And we didn't really know the answers yet. And I convinced him that I should do this field research study and not just work from home for a year, but actually work from 12 different countries over 12 months. And it was pretty wild. And I kind of held my breath as he looked at me like, first I lost my mind and then was like, okay, do it. And I think what really made him say yes was two things. I said, one, if at any point you think I'm not performing at my best or doing my job well, I will come back. And two, this will cost $0 outside of my current salary to the organization. I will pay for my travels just like I would pay for my rent. And so I think between those two things, he didn't really have that much to lose.
Mhm.
And so how did I choose where to go? Well, I actually found out about this program, no longer exists, but it was called Remote Year. And this program organized professionals from different industries and countries to travel together as a group over the course of 12 months on a set itinerary that they created. And they would facilitate your ability to, they would facilitate the logistics of your living accommodations, of your co-working spaces, cultural events in each city. And we actually moved together as a group of 30 of us every month together as a group. And some of us, like me, employees for larger organizations, some business owners or freelancers. And it was pretty incredible to have the opportunity to do that and to do my job remotely, as I said I would, but also do surveys and focus groups and some research about remote work and with remote workers and find out what was working for them and what wasn't and where did they feel motivated and where didn't they, and put that all together in what was actually my first book that I wrote called Remotivation that came out in June of 2020. So it was kind of wild timing because as I was traveling, I was writing this book. I come back as planned March 1st of 2020, and then the whole world shuts down and the
Mhm.
world goes remote. And I had just written a book about that. And it was just wild timing. And so I was like, I can help my company figure this out, but I can also help so many organizations figure out
Mhm.
the new world of remote work. And so that's what I did. I'll just pause there, but that was kind of where the first book came to be and how that experience came to be.
Okay. Whew. All right. So the program that you took part in, were you aware of this when you pitched this idea?
Yes. So
Okay.
as part of
That
my
makes so
research,
much more sense because I'm like, one, this is brilliant, but also, I mean, some people are just very creative, but like to me, it would help if it was born of somewhere. Like if you saw this and you're like, okay, wait a minute. Like I could pitch this, this would be great. I could learn X, I could bring it back to the organization, etc.
right,
Yeah,
and not have to spend my time or worry about where am I going to live and
right.
where am I going to work from and will I have Wi-Fi? And I could just focus on my job and enjoying the country I was in.
Yeah. So where were can you tell us where you went?
Sure. And so, of course, it wasn't just traveling around a country. I had an apartment in a city in a country. So I'll give you the cities and the countries. So started in Lima, Peru, then Santiago, Chile, Mexico City, Mexico, Medellin, Colombia, Hanoi, Vietnam, Chiang Mai, Thailand, Kyoto, Japan, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, Split, Croatia, Lisbon, Portugal, Valencia, Spain, and Cape Town, South Africa.
Wow. What an experience. Okay. So tell us, so you went into this really with the context, I'm sure, of like, wow, this would be so cool. And also knowing, as you mentioned, no way to know how really truly big or rapid of a trend this was going to become, but knowing in HR, like this is kind of where things are heading. So what if we understand better as an organization? What are we willing to consider, et cetera. But it seems like, from what I know of the second book, that a lot more came out of it than just that. So I guess just tell us a little bit, like, I don't know, tell us some interesting stories and what started to sort of formulate in your mind as you were having these experiences.
Yeah. So to your point, the first book was really about the professional side of it. It was very much like a how-to for remote workers and how to be fulfilled and motivated as a remote worker. And I really based it on the thesis of like, wherever you go, there you are.
Hmm.
So all these remote workers who thought, including myself, who thought being able to work from anywhere would make me feel fulfilled and happy and be like the silver bullet to motivation at work. And certainly, of course, your environment plays a huge role in how you feel about your job. But 3 or 4 months into the experience, when the novelty faded, we were all kind of like, well, I still don't love my job. So what
Hmm.
does that mean? Like, it's awesome that I get to do it on a beach, but that makes it more tolerable, maybe, but not necessarily more enjoyable. And I still feel like I'm not kind of making the impact I want to have. And I'm not really growing the skills or having new experiences that I feel like are interesting or challenging. And so that's when I started to really say, oh, aha, this is interesting. And take my HR toolkit and say, well, what does drive us and motivate us at work? Putting
Hmm.
the lens of the remote work environment on top of it. But that's where I came up with like my frameworks about remote work, about what are the 6 core drivers of our motivation. And I'll just quickly mention them and then I'll say what's different about the second book. So what my research showed me is that there's 6 core drivers of our motivation and fulfillment, not just as remote workers, but really for all of us. And that's our relationship to our money,
Hmm.
identity, routines, growth, impact, and joy. And so, a lot of what I talk about in my keynote talks is how do we activate and manage each of those 6 drivers to feel fulfilled and perform at our best at work? And as
Hmm.
I mentioned before, they change over time, different priorities in your life at different times. But what I do is work with organizations on how to identify what's driving you right now. How do you talk about it? How do you identify it? Or what do you want to drive you that's not? And how do we activate that better?
Hmm.
That's a lot of what my first book was about. And as I would do these keynote talks the last 6 years, and as, like you said, the world of remote work has evolved and now we're hybrid, or now it's less of a how do we do this thing, right? People kind of are figuring it out. Um, I've leaned to more talk about how do we manage through all the uncertainty going on all the time, not just where we're working from, but the macro and micro changes that are happening where just change seems to be the only constant in life right now.
Hmm.
And as I was thinking, how do I bring the lessons of that to life, I would start to dabble with putting my travel stories into my keynote talks. Like, of course, I could tell you a case study of a similar financial services industry who also managed through change. People are want to be taken out of their day to day and kind of want
Hmm.
to hear something they haven't heard before. So anytime I would incorporate a travel story, I was really noticing people were just like enjoying being immersed in a story and taken away somewhere. But then I could say, and here's the point. And
Hmm.
here's the lesson, and here's the framework, and here's how to apply it to your career and to your life. And I found that it resonated much more than if I told something that felt relevant to their day to day. So actually
Hmm.
taking them out of their day to day allowed them to make the connections that made sense to them instead of kind of forcing it down their throats. And so I said, oh, I think I have a second book here because people love hearing the personal sides of the stories, the adventures, the anecdotes, who I met, what they were like, the cultures of the places I traveled to. So the second book, The Scenic Route, which is coming out in August, is really about the personal side of that same year. So we've got the first book, the professional side, the second one, the personal, but no less relevant for our lives, for our careers, with all the kind of, but instead of in your face actions and insights, it's more self-reflection kind of
Hmm.
things that bubble up after each one. And so that's really the difference between the two.
Yeah. It's really interesting when you mention, you could deliver the same content with the context of like, here's a case study, here's how this company did this, or here's how this person. Um, but the impact of these, personal anecdotes and kind of the storytelling aspect of it, the impact that has, I think it makes a lot of sense to me because I find that I think we're in year 7 of the podcast and having these conversations, we come back to these recurring themes, often in the challenges or the opportunities that it all really comes down to psychology and human interaction and, understanding yourself and understanding others, and then how that influences how you lead and, how you drive motivation or how you help people feel safe amidst uncertainty and change. So I think, it makes sense that the stories are more interesting probably to people because they are different and they're unique, but the underlying themes, are consistent because it's all rooted in the human experience, essentially.
Exactly it. You took the
Yeah.
words out of my mouth. Those stories are the human parts of what we go through during times of change. And
Hmm.
someone can say, as they listen to a story of mine, they can say, I've never been there, but I felt that.
Hmm.
And that's when the story really becomes a bridge into like, oh wow, that brought up something for me. And what
Hmm.
could I do differently about that? Or, what really resonated that I want to consider? What do I want to bring back to my team or my job? And stories are what stays with you.
Hmm.
Case
Yeah.
studies, not so much.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm looking at my outline, which I'm about to abandon, which is fine. So I want to ask you 3 questions, okay? But I want to tell you all 3 of them up front so that you understand how to pick what you share for
Sure.
each, okay? So I'm really interested to hear like just a crazy story about like travel or a place you were, like something, interesting from a travel perspective.
Mhm.
I'm interested something you learned about yourself that
Mhm.
surprised you. And then, what would you say is the or one of the most compelling stories that you tell from your trip that really resonates with leaders who are responsible for, navigating and leading through change?
Hmm. Oh my gosh. I know which ones I'm going to tell. I'm going to just write it in the order. Um, okay, great story. Second one is a learning of myself. And the third one was what leaders really like. Okay,
Hmm.
got it. Okay, so one kind of wild story. Um, and I'll tell you the process of writing it because I think that was interesting too. So each of the chapters in this new book, The Scenic Route, are one story from each country. So it's not like everything that happened that month.
Hmm.
The anchor in one moment, one experience, one day. And I sit down to write my chapter for Thailand, and I'm like, oh, I've got 2 really good stories from that month, like 2 very unique, cool experiences. Which one should I write about? They're totally different. I can't combine them. They're unrelated. And so I said, let me just write both of them separately, and I'll choose which one I like better, and that's the one I'll include. So I write both, and I'm like, wait a second, these are way more connected than I thought they are. So let me tell you the story, and then I'll tell you how they're connected. So the first one was about me learning how to meditate from a Buddhist monk in a monastery in Chiang Mai, Thailand. It was this amazing experience. I had taken a meditation workshop before in New York, very different type A New Yorker crowd. And this was just something I never experienced before. And what I learned from this monk about meditation and about Buddhism is this idea that the path to inner peace and this feeling of liberation and freedom is through releasing our identity, of
Mm-hmm.
letting go of titles and ego and, achievements and needing to be at a certain level at a certain time in our lives or whatever it might be. And that is the path to inner peace. And through meditation, we can access that.
Mm-hmm.
So I loved that. And I tell a beautiful story of what the monk was saying and what was going on and who was around me. And then I had this other story about how we went to see a drag show with lady boys dancing on the stage. And we got to meet these performers in advance and do a Q&A with them. And we got to ask them about their lives and what it was like for them and how they feel when they perform and when they're in their costumes and everything. And it was also a story about identity. And for them, the path to freedom and liberation and peace is self-expression. It's claiming your identity. It's saying, this is who I am. This is who I want to be. It's being bold and loud about it. And so I thought, wow, both of these stories are about identity. Totally different paths to get there, but they're both
Mm-hmm.
about getting to a place of peace and liberation. And so what I try to do when I tell these stories is not like tell you the answer or this is what you should do or the action you should take. I just share my own self-reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And as a reader can take from it what feels right or true for you. And so, and I don't always tie it up in a bow either. I said, it left me in this chapter, I say, these two stories left me, or two experiences left me with two questions. Who am I when I don't have to be anything? This is like what the monks taught me. Who am I when I don't have to be anything?
Mm-hmm.
And then what the ladyboys taught me is who am I when I allow myself to be everything?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like two sides of the same coin. And
Yeah.
I just like, wow, I don't know if I have the answers yet, but I love the idea of sitting with those questions and allowing myself to ask them whenever I want and just see what comes up.
Yeah.
And so that's an example of one of my chapters.
That's so interesting. So I went to a retreat in August of 2024. And prior to that retreat, I would have told you that I don't do yoga, I don't meditate, and I don't like poetry. And that week, I mean, it changed my life in many ways, but I would no longer say any of those things. Um, and so what is interesting to me about what you just shared is I think the connection is that they're both about really attachment, to expectation.
Mm,
Whether that's the expectation you're putting on yourself, like I think when we talk about like ego and, I should do, I should be, I need to achieve, a lot of that is, I'm not saying it's not influenced externally, but it's like an inner narrative, right? And so the idea of releasing that and detaching from, that identity to be who you really are. And on, the other hand, with the drag show, it's releasing the attachment to the expectation of others that I should be this, this, or this, right? And instead just being what you want to be. So that's
yeah,
really interesting.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
well.
Okay, so what did you learn about yourself?
Okay, so I learned about myself. This was really interesting. It's actually connected. No, they're different stories. Okay, so this happened in Portugal. I went to see a fado show. So fado is a Portuguese form of song. It's supposed to be a very visceral like type of song that's really a lot about yearning and love and sadness and like the even if you don't understand any Portuguese, which I don't, it moves something in you. It's a very emotional
Kind of
type
like
of
an opera?
singing. Um, Opera can do that to some people. I know people say that, yeah, as well. It's a different type of singing, but I think emotionally the
Hmm.
impact can be similar. And I remember seeing this show, and it was around the time where my year was ending. and at the same time learning about this Portuguese word called saudade. Saudade is a Portuguese word that really means it's similar to nostalgia, but instead of just having this longing for what once was, it can also communicate a yearning of something that might never be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in that moment, I was feeling really sad because I thought, this year is coming to an end. Like, it's almost like I didn't want it. Like, could this be my life? Could I keep
Mm-hmm.
traveling forever? Am I really going to go back to my shoebox size apartment in Manhattan and go to an office 5 days a week? So I started to feel that what they call saudade, this sort of yearning for a life that I wanted, but like I knew I couldn't just like travel forever. Like that's not possible. And that chapter is a lot about this idea of like impermanence, the idea of
Mm-hmm.
like things coming to an end and how it seems sad, but there's also this like beauty in knowing something won't last forever, in
Mm-hmm.
knowing that there's like an ending to a beautiful chapter and feeling like, oh, there's something about the transience of that is like beautiful. Some like just knowing that like a love story doesn't have to be a life story.
Mm-hmm.
Things can be beautiful in one chapter, and just because they were beautiful doesn't mean they need to last forever. And maybe actually wanting them to last forever can kind of like ruin what once
Mm-hmm.
was. So that was a really interesting thing for me, and that had like made me think of so many things, of jobs, of romantic relationships, of just vacations, experiences that like no, they were perfect in their beautiful fleeting form, and they don't need to last longer than that, and that's okay. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a nice lesson for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. I think it's a very like mature, place to get to have peace with letting it be what it is and not, wanting it to be more. And I think part of that comes from just understanding that it's hard to know when sometimes it's hard to know when you're having an experience that is that when it's happening, right? It's easier to look back and realize it's never going to happen again. And so, in some ways, reminding yourself of that encourages you to appreciate it, when
Yeah.
you're living it, which is, I mean, what we should all be doing, but is,
Mhm.
again, one of those things that is easier said than actually done.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, okay, what about the story that leaders tend to really
Yeah.
enjoy or appreciate?
So, especially with leaders, people who tend to be further along in their careers, like more seniority. I tell a story about flamenco dancing. So you may hear this when we work together later next month. Um, and how I saw this flamenco dance show in Spain. There's a definitely a theme around shows. Actually, these two chapters, I just love like live music, dancing. Um, and so I went to see a flamenco show in Valencia, Spain, and I noticed a pattern among the dancers that kept coming on stage, especially the women, that they tend to be older than the typical dancers you see in other genres of dance, like ballet, where, you peak in your 20s and it's all about your youth and flexibility and the kind of skills and body type that are more easily accessible when you're younger.
Hmm.
But in flamenco dancers, they don't peak until their 40s. They continue to dance into their 50s and 60s. And it's actually believed in flamenco that you don't actually have the emotional maturity to convey the essence of the dance until you are older, until you've like lived life's hardships and passions and struggles and beauty and joy and all those experiences accumulate to you being able to fully express what's necessary in this
Hmm.
genre of dance. And I just loved learning that so much. And it made me
Hmm.
really think about how we can peak at different times in our life. We can peak later in life. There's no rules. Who said that if you didn't start, your next business in your 20s from your parents' garage, that you missed the boat or whatever it might be, that there's so much opportunity for us to keep growing, keep learning, keep perfecting our craft later in life, and better being able to express it and share it and teach others about it, having had those experiences. So I think when I tell that story, it really resonates with more senior level leaders.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. I didn't know that about flamenco. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
I didn't know either. When I saw that, I was like, oh, this is so interesting. And I went back to my apartment in Valencia and I researched the history and tradition of flamenco
Hmm.
dancing, and that's what I learned.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. So okay, so what I want to, I'm realizing that we're talking about all of this, and I want to tie it back to the title, or the topic. So, how have you taken these experiences and these stories, and like, how does it translate to the idea of change resilience or leading through change? Like, I don't want you to give it all away because I want people to get the book and read it, but like, what's
Really,
kind of the high level overview?
yeah, the high level is that travel is essentially a concentrated period of change.
Hmm.
Everything's different when you travel. Even if you're going to the next state, I'm not even talking about, exotic international travel. Take yourself When you take yourself out of your typical environment, when you're eating foods you're not used to eating, when your routines are different, maybe there's a new language, you're with people, that you're not used to. So it is in a way this like microcosm of what happens in a time of big change in our lives. And there's so much that travel can teach us about our relationship to our identity, to vulnerability, to trust. And those are key human emotions that come up during times of change, whether it's organizational restructuring or a new job, a new software you have to get used to using at work, whatever it might be. These questions of identity, like, well, what's in this for me? Like, how will this benefit me? Or how will this bring me down in my new job? Or like, who can I trust? But what if my new manager doesn't know all the work I put in? Like, all these questions of those same themes kind of come up. And so instead of, like I said before, giving you a case study of a firm, which might end up being a very sort of strategic discussion and not about the human emotion people go through times of change. And you can have the best change strategy, you can have the best new processes, you could put all the right people in all the right boxes, but if they are not on board emotionally, nothing's going to happen or get done, and your vision is not going to come to life. So, by using stories of travel, by taking them out of their day to day, but accessing those same human emotions that come up during times of change, they're able to pull from it, like what resonates with them and what makes sense.
Hmm.
And then I can say, and here's how you might want to think about it differently or adjust it, or what you might consider during a time that might be challenging for you, and how you could be more adaptable and manage through it so it feels better for you and those around you.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. What I was also thinking about when you talked about like some of the experiences you had going from place to place, like, of course, I mean, I would hope you went to see shows everywhere and you did, anything you could. I know that when I travel, which is often for work, I will always use any free time I have, even if it's 1 hour, to go walk around and, just appreciate different sites. Or even when you're, in the midst of the travel, talking with different people, like, it is such an opportunity to really expand your perspective and to think differently. And it made me think about how, there are many, many opportunities for leaders to do that without it being, a 12-month adventure to work in 12 different countries. It could be, there's a service leader that's been on the podcast a couple times, Adam Gloss, who, has talked to me and on LinkedIn about his connection with nature and how he prioritizes every week going out for a long hike and disconnecting and spending time because it just gives him the space to think, to change his scenery, right? To allow that time for reflection, et cetera. And I know you're speaking at the event we're having in New York in at the beginning of June, and that's the feedback we often get as well is yes, it's an investment of a day away from the work, but you come together and you hear all of these different perspectives, and it gives you the ability to see the problems or the opportunities through a different lens, which often, people have said, like, I feel so re-energized. Or one of my favorite pieces of feedback that I've received multiple times is, I feel so much less alone, right? Because when you think about these leaders who they may only have that opportunity to kind of get that big picture, holistic view with a bunch of different peers from different spaces, different places, they are in it, they don't necessarily understand that no one has it all figured out, right? Like everyone's grappling with these same things. And so if, I can provide a space for them to come and feel relieved or feel a sense of camaraderie, I think that's a great thing. So I think,
Beautiful. Absolutely.
wherever you can look for that opportunity to kind of, switch gears and mix things up a little bit, there's a lot of learning and benefit that can come out of it.
Absolutely.
Um, so I'm really curious about something, but I don't know if this is too delicate a question to ask. But so after these 12 months, did you just go back and quit? Were you like, hey, guess what I learned? I don't want to come to the office every day anymore. Like, what was kind of the journey from the end of the experiment to kind of going out on your own?
Yeah. So I came back, like I mentioned, as planned, March 1st of 2020. So timing was wild. I went into the office for 5 business days before they told everyone to work from home because of a global pandemic. And I just couldn't believe I had just finished the first draft of a book about remote work. So I kept writing, I kept doing my job. I didn't come back and say, you know, I didn't even have time to say I don't want to do this because I was back home and it was just a wild time, right? Everyone was sort of in the same boat. No
Hmm.
one was doing anything. So it wasn't like now everyone's on an adventure and I have to go into the office. It was just like the world had changed. So again, it was like getting used to this new norm. And then in May of 2020, my company was not doing well financially. They decided to do a round of layoffs and I ended up getting laid off.
Mm.
And this is before I could even share my research and findings. And we were just starting to talk about it because everyone was just, what's going on? And I said, well, I have a body of research the world needs. I have the catalyst to do. I've always wanted to do my own thing. I don't know if I would have done it then, maybe eventually, probably
Hmm.
eventually. But it was sort of like the timing just worked out. And I said, well, better no time like now. I have something that people need. I can share with it and help as many people as possible. So that's how I ended up doing it.
Yeah, that's interesting. That question came to my mind when you were talking about Portugal and that sense of like, is this really over? Can I really go back to the office 5 days a week? That's where that popped into
Yeah.
my mind. Like, well, I wonder, like, it would be hard, I think, to go back to the same
Oh
after
yeah.
that. I mean, to your point, wherever you are, there you are. Like, I guess not necessarily, right? Maybe you could have just, you know, negotiated a different working arrangement or whatever it is, but I think that I have to imagine that experience changes your perspective enough to force you to ask some really deep questions of like, what do I really want, and is it this, which is just again interesting that they agreed to have you do that because how could that not be the outcome for most people? I think like not that I think you would just come back and quit your job, but it's really interesting the universe's timing of it all, and
For sure. And I think even without the world going remote and without the global pandemic, I mean, remember, I decided to do this because the research was already showing that remote work was going to be the trend. Now, it wouldn't have
Mhm.
happened that quickly, but without the pandemic, I thought, okay, well, maybe this new thing I'm going to do in addition to my job, or what's going to be different is I'm going to bring this body of research home and I'm going to help our company become at the forefront of remote work. Like I already was like, okay, maybe I won't be able to be fully remote in the same way anymore, but I was excited about like maybe I'll have a new title. Maybe I'll do a new type of job. Maybe like, and it's interesting because then as I'm sure you know, a couple of years into COVID, these roles started coming like head of remote and whatever.
Mhm.
So I already started to feel a little bit like, well, at least I have this exciting new thing to offer, and I'd written the draft of a book, and so I knew like
Mhm.
something would be different. I
Yeah.
didn't know exactly what.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay, so the book comes out in August, and it is available for pre-order. So we will make sure everyone knows where to find it and where to get their copy. Is there anything else on the topic that kind of comes to mind for you that you would want to share or, I guess, leave folks with?
Well, I think, for me, the title, The Scenic Route, is a reminder of there isn't a direct way or the right way to do life, to do your career, to get to where you want to go. And sometimes life will give you detours. And then whether things are chosen or for you or you choose them yourself, just like remembering that like the change alone is limited power. Like you have more agency than you think.
Hmm.
You have the ability to really direct more of your experience more than you think. And just when you feel like change is happening to you, just remember like, where is my agency here? What can I control? What decisions can I make? And how can I adapt through this so it feels easier? And like, where can I see the opportunity in this change, even if I didn't choose it? And so
Yeah.
I hope people that read the book kind of see some of that happen. In me, and then it reflects back on themselves.
Hmm.
So that's what I hope. I also think the book is a great book club kind of book because it's a fun read. I bring you into the adventures. I hope you're going to feel like you're with me, but it also sparks some really deep reflections and interesting
Hmm.
conversations. So you're part of a book club. It's a great thing to discuss with your friends. And I have a book club discussion guide that you can download when you pre-order. If you go to the scenicroutebook.com
Okay.
and you pre-order and you put in your email, I'll send you the first 3 chapters right away, book club discussion guide, an interview between me and my editor, which is fun. It's kind of like this style, but a little behind the scenes of how we decided what stories to put in and what
Hmm.
we did. Um, and for companies and organizations, it's a great lens through which to talk about managing through change. So for employee resource groups, teams, events, things like that, I'm happy to facilitate a conversation around the book or do more of my traditional keynote talk on managing change, but that incorporates these stories.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think I was having a chat with someone this morning who is based in the UK, and we got into this conversation about just cultural differences in how different cultures approach work and work-life balance. And, I think you mentioned the workshop, the meditation workshop you had done in New York, and like the very New Yorker vibe, which I love and have identified with in many ways for a long time, right? But I think particularly for those of us in the US, we are very programmed to focus on the destination. And I think when that is all you're looking at, you miss all of the scenery, around you. And I think that it is a really important thing to, whether it's good change, not so great change, intentional disruption or happenstance. It's all part of the life experience, right? And it really comes back to, I think, the Buddhist monk and the idea of letting go of the attachment to the destination and the outcome and just living the experience. So
I love that.
it's a
Yep.
really good reminder for everyone. I'm excited to read the book myself. So the scenicroutebook.com.
Yes.
You can also find Sarah on LinkedIn, and we will link those in the show notes for everyone. But thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you,
on
Sarah.
and sharing some
Appreciate
of your
it.
story with us today. And I'm excited to meet you in person in a few weeks.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Absolutely. You can find more by visiting the home of Unscripted at futureoffieldservice.com. The podcast is published in partnership with IFS. You can learn more at ifs.com. As always, thank you for listening.